You are listening to Science Coast with Mallory Havens and
Chris White.
And today our guests are
Katey Sheets
and
Adam Caridi.
Welcome back, guys. So you guys are both graduate students here at Lewis University, and we wanted to ask you about your research. So what are you studying? Why are you studying it? What interests you about that particular topic?
All right, I guess I'll go first. So I am looking at antimicrobial materials specifically for wound healing. So what I'm doing is I'm taking an algae derivative and making a hydrogel out of it. I'm including antimicrobial nanoparticles in these networks, and I'm testing not only how well they kill bacteria and how they kill bacteria, but also how they can aid in wound healing for chronic wounds. And these are all based on biocompatibility and trying to better wound healing materials effectively.
Can I ask a stupid question?
Sure.
Because you're a chemistry graduate student.
I am.
So it sounds like biology that you're doing.
Oh, no, she's doing both.
Yes, I am doing both. So I work collaboratively in the chemistry department and the biology department. So with the hydrogels, the chemistry side is, networking, cross-linking, how these hydrogels are interacting on the supramolecular scale in chemistry. But then the application-based is where the biology comes in. How well are we killing bacteria? That is from the biological standpoint, but then the chemistry comes in is what are the mechanisms in which the hydrogel is interacting with the bacteria on that chemical scale, not the biological scale.
As well as actually monitoring wound closure and fibroblasts.
Correct, which is where I work with Dr. Havens.
Yeah, that's me. In case you guys didn't know.
Oh, wait, Adam, your turn.
So I do nothing related to Katey at all. Even though we work in the same lab, not at all on the same project. So I work in the chemical mechanical planarization field, and where my focus and interests fall are taking macro environments and modulating them to be more chemically active. So basically I take things that are commonly used for just purely mechanical forces, and we're trying to make them more chemically active by adding different functional groups and whatnot to the surfaces.
Why?
Because in the CMP is used for the making of semiconductors. So in that process, as things are shrinking to get smaller and faster and better for the consumer, right? So the phone wants more power, more output, and everything like that. So you have to make these chips that go into your phone much smaller. So if you are using the same excess mechanical force on something much more smaller and more fragile, it's going to break. So right now, I believe in the semiconductor industry, it's just about 50% of all chips made are thrown out because of defects. So those all mainly come from mechanical forces. So we're trying to reduce the mechanical force and make it more chemically driven.
So what drew you guys to these particular projects? Like, why were you interested in wound healing and matrices?
So originally, and this is part of my college journey, was I was going to go into nursing. I, went through high school thinking, I'm going to be a nurse. I'm going to go through med school. And I had a shadowing event with my high school, and I realized I do not want to do that. So
good to find that out early.
So I then started searching, what did I like to do in high school? What were the classes that really got me excited? And chemistry was that class. So going into picking my major, it was, I want to do a chemistry major. And then when it came to having the opportunity to do undergraduate research, I started looking at the different groups that were on campus. And one of the big ones was, doing antimicrobial hydrogels for wound healing. There was already some work being done on, some composite systems that are a little different than what I'm working on currently. And it was just like, wow, this is, the perfect meshing between the part of me that's interested in biology and the part of me that knows that chemistry is where I'm supposed to be.
Right, and brings in that whole healthcare scenario too, where you don't have to actually touch patients or hear them complain.
But you can still help them.
You can help them in a much more tolerable way. I mean, again, kudos to nurses. I just don't want to personally deal with patients.
So where do you see this leading to when you're done with your master's degree? What comes next after that?
To be honest with you, the exciting part is I have no idea. I've been looking at possibly working in pharmaceuticals or drug development, or just sticking with nanocomposite materials for wound healing.
So solving problems in this area.
Correct.
And so wherever it takes you, as long as you can continue to do this style of work, that's going to be interesting to you.
Yes, research is a very important side of me, but also the research that's centered toward biology and chemistry.
Very cool. Adam, how did you end up here?
Yeah, why did you get passionate about making unflat things flat?
Well,
I know that's how you describe CMP. I'm not just being crazy.
that is, very accurate. That's actually not where I started. When I first started doing research, I started in water filtration. So we're using these macroporous beads to take out organic dyes from waters. Project kind of lost funding, kind of lost its wind, and then I just joined. I enjoyed the polymer part of it, so those macro materials and all that, and their different uses based on pore structure and rigidity and everything of that sort. So then that's kind of why I fell into doing CMP. It kind of just, I didn't really have any forethought into it. I just kind of tried it out, and luckily for me, first try was a good one for me.
So before you jump into the lab and start doing experiments for both of you, I mean, what are the steps necessary for younger students as they're thinking about their career and potentially being a researcher? What should they be thinking about to set themselves up properly to become graduate student researchers?
Never attempt to put a time limit to how long your experiment's going to take, because if you think it'll take 2 hours, it's going to be 5. That's just how it happens. And just think about every little thing. At Lewis, the labs that me and Katey work in, they're kind of spread out throughout the building. And without good forethought, you find yourself really getting in your steps, which I guess can be good, but at the same time exhausting going up the stairs so many times. So yeah, no, it's just forethought into your experiment and what you're trying to accomplish and what you're going to need.
I would say it most definitely takes some thought and planning into not only your experimentation, but also your time management, most definitely. There have been plenty of days where I'm like, yeah, I can get this done in 1 day, and then it ends up taking me 2. But then you also have to realize you could generate just 1 data point, but that 1 data point could be very, very important. So you really have to think about not only make sure you're using your time effectively, but also even if you didn't, you can still learn from that 1 data point.
So I just got, right before the podcast, I was one of the faculty members for a master's thesis committee, and the student was giving his final defense. And afterwards, his advisor asked him, could you summarize for me something that you learned? And he said, I really need to pay attention to detail.
Oh, yeah. That's definitely part of it.
So I'm curious, where along the path did you realize that you had to pay attention to detail?
Very quickly. So a big part of being in a research group and, disseminating is group meetings. And you need to have those. They're very important. That's kind of where you learn, what you do know and what you don't know. And you have to be okay with not being okay and being able to say, I might not know this, but I can now go back and find the answer or attempt to bring a thought forward, and be able to understand that in the finer detail that I need in order to fully disseminate what my project is.
Details probably became the most relevant whenever you go and try to repeat an experiment. So if you do it, and obviously the first time you have nothing to compare to, but then you go back maybe a day later or even later that day and try to rerun it. But if you don't make sure that you follow the process exactly the same way, there's so many factors in chemistry that will ultimately change it altogether. So that's kind of when I first realized tracking details were so important. Everything from pH to how far I have things apart to how fast I'm mixing something, how long I'm letting it sit before I use it. All those factors definitely play a huge role.
It makes me think about cooking and, my wife's exasperation when on occasion I create something that actually is very flavorful and tasty. And she looks at me and she goes, "What did you do?" And I'm like, "I don't remember." And she's like,
That's how I cook too. I go, it all goes in the pot.
"What? How are you going to recreate this if you haven't
You're like, I'm not.
paid attention?" It's like, well, I hope you enjoy it now because it ain't happen again.
That's why I cook like that, because in the lab you have to be so exacting and measure every little thing. And I always had in grad school a 4-channel timer, so I could have 4 timers running at once. Because anytime I had a period of time in between, like an incubation period, I'd go start something else and I'd have to like plan it out. And so when I get home and I need food, I just want to not measure.
Microwave?
No. I will cook, but I don't want to measure anything. And I'd just be like, I think this will work well together. Who knows? And then I just make so nothing gets repeated.
But it's absolutely true. If you want to be a good bench scientist, so you have to be the opposite of what I just described and what you just described. You really need to get in there and document, and this notion of the lab notebook and writing down every little detail. And it's amazing when you actually start doing it, how many little details there actually are. And just subtle differences in the way that you do something actually can have manifest in ways that are quite surprising.
And when it comes to getting a patent on something, and if that ever comes to a legal case where people are fighting over a patent, if your lab notebook doesn't reflect exactly what you did, you could lose that court case and millions of dollars.
So I have another quick question for y'all. I remember being a grad student, and the notion of research is that you're doing things that haven't necessarily been done before. And I remember doing an analysis and getting some results off of the computer and going through the computer results and going, wow, I've just observed something that nobody else on the planet had ever observed before. So have you had those experiences, and can you share them and talk to the audience about what those are like?
So for me, in the field of semiconductors and CMP, since it is such a competitive industry in nature, everything's very secretive. So I feel like I have a lot more of those moments than like the average graduate student, just because it's like a lot of the papers and review articles are from like 2005. And it's like, cool, that's not relevant.
What's happened since then?
That's not relevant. So yeah, no, it definitely is really cool, and it is rewarding. And that's honestly one of the reasons that make it feel good and easy to come back and kind of motivate you to keep going forward, because maybe one day what you found will become a standard in everyday life.
Did you realize in the moment that what you had just done, or what you had just, the data that you just analyzed was unique and novel, and that you were the first person to see it? Did you realize that in the moment?
Yes.
How about you, Katey?
I'm kind of like on the opposite spectrum that Adam is, where a lot of my work is widely looked at. However, specifically with the work that I look at, I'm actually validating mechanisms. So for me, it's, I've collected this piece of data or this set of data, and it's validating this mechanism that is not quite explained to the extent that we can explain it now. Because a lot of the articles that I find, they say, this is happening, but we don't know why. So part of what I'm doing is finding out the why. But then to further onto that question that you just had, there has most definitely been times where in the moment I did not recognize what I had just done, to the point where I had to get to the dissemination piece again, talking to my mentor, talking with other people, hearing myself say it, I just found this. And then it's kind of like, oh, I just figured out something. And like, it just hits you and you're like, sometimes you don't even know how to feel. You're just kind of like, did I just do this? I did.
Nice. I wanted to ask you guys one final question, unless Chris had more final questions. Okay. I know that you guys get to travel to disseminate your work, and you've been really cool places. What is the coolest place you've been to as a grad student here where you've been able to disseminate your work?
I was going to say, don't say your research lab.
Oh, no,
Or
I
a
don't
group
think
meeting.
they would.
So for me, I have actually, before college, never been on a plane. So, and I feel like I know where Adam is going to say, but for me, it was actually my first ever conference was to go to Atlanta, Georgia. And that was the first time I'd ever been on a plane, which
Nice.
was amazing to me to have that opportunity. And I think that I'll never forget that feeling, or being able to go somewhere, and talk to other people that were just like me, but also learn about the various pieces of science that are happening in the world at a real-time scale. Like, you're not reading a paper, you're listening to this person tell you about their research.
That's likely unpublished.
Correct. Like, it's in process just like you are.
Awesome. How about you, Adam?
Yeah, so I'd like Katey to go first because I thought for sure she was going to say Sweden, but that's all right. No, so it's been awesome. I've done just a little more traveling than Katey has in terms of going for conferences. I've been to Sweden and Vancouver. And honestly, I know Canada's not that far from us, but just the city of Vancouver and the conference center was beautiful. But then just being able to go to Scandinavia was also at the same time just as amazing.
Well, you've been listening to Science Coast, and the views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are the speaker's own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of Lewis University. The material and information presented here is for general information purposes only. The Lewis University name and all forms and abbreviations are the property of its owner, and its use does not imply endorsement of or opposition to any specific organization, product, or service. This podcast was produced in the WLRA podcast studios at Lewis University. Visit lewisu.edu for more information about Lewis University. I'm Mallory Havens with
Chris White.
And Katey Sheets.
And Adam Caridi.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.